Welcome students, this is Dr. Deepthi Variku, Department of Physiotherapy, Dolphin Vijay Institute of Biomedical and Natural Sciences. Our today's topic is phalangeal fracture. Phalangeal fractures are common hand injuries that include the breaking of three phalanx, the distal phalanx, middle phalanx or the proximal phalanx. So, phalangeal fractures include the intra-articular or extra-articular fractures. They could be also classified as stable fractures or unstable fractures. So when we talk about the incidence, it is most common injuries of the hand in the skeletal system. It accounts about 10% of all the fractures. Now, articular fractures are those fractures which involve the base or the condyles of the phalanx. These are subdivided into avulsion fractures, the shaft fractures that extend into the joint, and then the extra-articular fractures which are mainly the diaphyseal fractures and involve the neck of the phalanx. So stable phalangeal fractures are impacted with little or no displacement. They are usually isolated fractures, and the stable fractures are mainly transverse fractures. When we talk about the unstable phalangeal fractures, they are usually comminuted, displaced, oblique or spiral fracture. When we talk about the mechanism of injury of these fractures, that is mainly due to external injury, and most are due to direct trauma. Trauma could be to the hand or to the digits directly. The distal phalanx is divided into three anatomical zones: the tuft, that is the the last part, then the waist, that is the middle part, and the base, that is the lowest part. Distal phalanx are more common for fracturing than the middle phalanx, and least are the proximal phalanx. When we see the incidence, we see that small finger is most commonly affected, and we could say that little finger accounts for 38% of all hand fractures. So this is about the basic incidence of the fractures. So we will see one by one. Initially we will be starting with the distal fractures. Okay, so first is the phalanx fracture. So classification of the distal phalanx fracture is by Schindler. So he divided the distal phalanx fractures, as I already told you, into tuft, then the waist, and then the base fracture. So these fractures could be simple fractures or comminuted fractures. So shaft fractures include transverse fractures or longitudinal fractures. Then there are articular fractures which include palmar fractures or epiphyseal fractures or dorsal fractures. Fracture could be single fragmented, or here you could see these are the multi-fragmented fractures. These are comminuted fractures, and they are only not limited to the tuft, but they can extend to the diaphysis, as you could see in the diagram. The intra-articular fractures are mainly the pediatric fractures. Salter-Harris gave us the classification for digital intra-articular fractures. So here you could see the classification of the digital intra-articular fractures. It could be type 1 fracture. Here you could see there is shearing through the growth plate. Type 2 fracture, you could see here, shearing through most of the growth plate with tiny triangular shaped fracture fragments. Then type 3 is the fracture across the epiphysis, exit through the growth plate. So these are the Salter-Harris classification for the fractures. Then we move towards the middle and the distal phalanx fractures. So these could be classified, as you can see in the diagram. The first one is the transverse fracture of the middle or distal phalanx. Then there could be spiral fractures. Here you could see there could be unicondylar, where it includes one condyle fracture, or bicondylar, where both the condyles get fractured separately. There could be dislocation. Here you could see the middle and distal phalanx is dislocating anteriorly, and here dorsally, ventral dorsal dislocation. Or there could be, along with dislocation, the avulsion fractures. So these are the classifications for the middle and the distal fractures. So when we see the pathophysiology of these fractures, it depends on the age. 10 to 29 years old, basic cause is the sports injury. 40 to 69 years, machinery is the most common, and more than 70 years, we see that the fracture is mainly due to age, falls, you can say. So there are some associated conditions also along with these fractures, like the distal phalanx fracture includes nail bed injuries. So we will have to see that. How to identify these fractures? You could go for radiographs. Recommended views are PA, lateral or oblique views, and or if it is not visible there, you could go for CT scans. As I already told you, proximal fractures could be three types: stable, unstable, unicondylar or bicondylar fractures. Neck fractures could be transverse, oblique, spiral, okay, and base fractures could be extraarticular or intraarticular. These are the basic classification of all the three fractures of the phalanx. Now moving towards the treatment. Orthopedic objectives are, we have to first make sure that alignment is proper with no degree of rotation or any angular deformities. Next, we have to make sure that stability is maintained. It is best achieved when bony congruity is restored and no risk of displacement is there. Now the rehabilitation outcomes, they will basically depend on whether the treatment is non-operative or operative. When we talk about non-operative treatment, we go for buddy taping or splinting technique. If we talk about the operative treatment, it could be closed reduction or open reduction and internal fixation, where we could use K-wires, we could use normal lag screws, okay. So depends on which type of management you are dealing with. So rehabilitation objectives are, first, to restore full range of motion of the digit and hand. So make sure that flexion is maintained at the PIP, DIP and thumb, and then extension up to 7 degrees at PIP, 8 degrees DIP and 5 degrees at thumb. Flexion extension needs to be maintained properly. Then the next main goal is muscle strength. Muscle strength, we have to maintain the strength of the muscles within the cast, which includes the muscles like interossei, lumbricals, long and short flexors of the digits, extensors of the digits, hypothenar and thenar muscles, and your long carpi muscles like flexor carpi ulnaris, flexor carpi radialis, or extensor carpi ulnaris and radialis. We have to make sure that functional goals are achieved as early as possible, like power grip, pincer grip, key pinch. All the pinches, grips are maintained and recovered, re-established as early as possible. Expected time of bone healing is usually 3 to 6 weeks. So we expect that up to 6 weeks it will be healed. So immobilization of the MCP IP joints for more than 3 to 4 weeks is associated with an increased risk of stiffness. So after, if there is immobilization till 4 weeks, we will have a severe stiffness of the digits. In phalangeal fractures, as we take it up to 12 weeks also, so there is a comprehensive risk of developing stiffness, which we have to make sure which is dealt properly. So the best treatment technique, as I already told you, we go for buddy taping. Buddy taping, the finger which is fractured along with the adjacent finger is taped in together. So it is a secondary bone healing with the callus formation which occurs here, and it is mainly indicated for imparted fractures or distal phalanx or turf fractures. So we could use buddy taping. Here you could see the diagram of here you could see the picture of buddy taping. A drawback of this is the possibility of stiffness, because after this taping is removed, there is severe stiffness which could be seen in the digits. Next, I told you, if it is not, then we could go for operative management like close reduction and application of the cast or splint. So for displaced transverse fractures mainly that are stable after close reduction, as well as for stable dorsal fractures of PIP, we use this. So it is when the involved digit is usually buddy taped to an adjacent digit and splint is placed. If the proximal phalanx is involved, a cast or splint is placed with the wrist in 30 degrees of extension, MCP in 60 to 90 degrees of flexion, and IP joint in 5 to 10 degrees of flexion. This close reduction and the internal fixation, I could show you the diagrams. You could see here. This is the percutaneous spinning. The X-ray shows the percutaneous spinning, and here you could see the internal fixations. I think you could appreciate it properly. Now, if we talk about this percutaneous spinning, close reduction and percutaneous spinning. So, we could see it is mainly for displaced transverse fractures that are unstable after closed reduction, for comminuted fractures or condylar fractures. Open reduction and internal fixation, this is the biomechanics behind it is stress shielding device for screw fixation. So, here the mode of healing is primary. When solid fixation is achieved, secondary with pin fixation, or when solid fixation is not achieved. So, what are the major indications? This is mainly done for comminuted articular fractures, and those fractures which are highly unstable, and mainly if we talk about the type of fracture, it is mainly used for spiral fractures. Then external fixation, it is again having the primary healing is the mode of healing, and indication is for the open or comminuted fractures mainly done. Then traction is also given, and here also the mode of healing is secondary with callus formation. Indications are various types of tractions have been used in past, but here what we use is skin and skeletal tractions properly. There could be associated injuries along with the phalangeal fractures, like there could be collateral ligament injury, or as I told you, the distal phalanx will be accompanied with a nail bed injury, or there could be open fracture, or if the tendon injury is along with the fracture, as we have already discussed in the previous class, a mallet fracture could also be there. Mallet fracture includes the DIP injury, that is along with the tendon injury. You could see this is the nail bed injury. The nail is also injured along with the distal phalanx. This is the open fracture, and here you could see the mallet finger fracture. So, treatment for mallet finger, as we have already discussed, soft tissue interruption or small avulsion fracture is closed splinting of the DIP joint, where we do the splinting in hyperextension for at least 6 to 8 weeks, followed by night splint for 4 to 8 weeks. If the bony avulsion fracture is there, that is the mallet fracture, then open reduction and internal fixation is the chosen way. If that occurs along with the rupture of FDP, that is mainly we could see deformities like Botinier deformity, there is a disruption of extensor mechanism. So, what we see, there is loss of extensor function at PIP joint, which leads to volar displacement of the lateral bands. When the lateral band goes volarly displaced, this results in flexion of the PIP joint, and due to flexion of PIP, volar displacement of lateral bands, there is a compensatory hyperextension at the DIP joint, that is the buttonhole or Bottinier's deformity. This is treated by splinting the PIP joint in extension and allowing the DIP joint motion for 4 to 6 weeks. This you can see, we could use a dorsal blocking splint in case of flexor tendon injuries along with the fractures, and this is the buttonhole deformity or the Bottinier's deformity. Now, PIP fractures, if they are present along the dislocation. Type 1 is a hyperextension injury when the volar plate avulsion is also present. Then type 2 is a dorsal dislocation of the middle phalanx, that is type 1 will go for volar and type 2 will go for dorsal. Type 3 is an actual fracture with either less than 1/3 of the articular surface involved in the fracture. This type of injuries require 4 to 6 weeks of immobilization with buddy taping and dorsal blocking splints in 20 to 30 degrees of flexion. Now, for treatment protocol in rehabilitation, there is we could divide the protocols in various stages, the first being the early to immediate stage. This is from day 0 to 1 week. Here we need bone healing initially. So, because it will include the inflammatory phase, so we could see there is no callus formation. We have to take precautions that the involved digits are not moving. So we could only go for mild movements over the unaffected digits and isometrics to the intrinsics of non-splinted fingers. Functional activities to the uninvolved extremity could be given. Then after treatment, after the second week, we know that now bone is in a healing stage. So we could say that we could take only the precautions has to be taken is to make sure that severe range of motions are not being indicated for that particular affected bone. Range of motion activities to all non-splinted joints could be given. Isometric strengthening to the intrinsic muscles, but no weight bearing. Mild functional activities could be induced. Then after 4 to 6 weeks, now we know that bone is in healing phase, where we could see the bridging callus is forming. So here we could go for full active and active assisted range of motion to all digits. Isometrics and isotonic exercises to the flexors, extensors and adductors. Functional activities, bimanual activities using the involved extremity are encouraged for self-care. Weight bearing could be included as tolerated by the patient. Then after the 6th week, now we know bone has healed. The fracture is usually stable. Now we know that strength of the callus is lower than that of the normal lamellar bone. But still some precautions need to be taken here, like night splint is used if necessary. Otherwise active assisted passive range of motion exercises to all digits are given. Gentle resistive exercises to digits for increasing strength. The involved extremity is used for self-care and full weight bearing has to be incorporated. After the 8th week, now we know it is in healed remodeling phase. So we could go for full range of motion, full progressive resisted exercises to the digits, full weight bearing, and the affected extremity is used for self-care. We have to take some long-term considerations regarding the phalangeal fractures. The patients need to be warned about possible future degenerative joint disease, or they should know that there could be decreased range of motion, or there could be residual deformity, or grip strength will be affected. So he has to work on all this along with his physiotherapist. The patient should be informed that to limit residual stiffness, motion has to be begun before the complete bony union, which places the fracture at risk of displacing or losing its proper alignment. So I would suggest that proper, early and full protocol rehabilitation should be managed and given to the therapist, to the patient, so that he could easily gain early range of motion, early function and full hand functional activities, which is very important. So that is about the phalangeal fractures. If anyone has any doubts, you could ask me. You all can call me, you can message me, you can drop an email, or you can WhatsApp me. I will feel free to ask questions. I will be feeling good to answer them. Thank you so much. See you all in next class.